If you don't think President Biden is going to be the nominee, who do you think is going to replace him?
Look, again, I think you got to track the incentives and the psychology of the party that's at issue here. In this case, that's the Democratic Party. There's an uncomfortable truth. Kamala Harris was not qualified to be the vice president. She didn't even make it to the Iowa caucus. She was wildly unpopular, and I think egregiously unqualified to serve as the vice president. She's failed on every initiative she's been given, most notably for border security, where that's been one of the real black marks on the Biden presidency, among many black marks on that presidency. Nonetheless, they went with her for one reason: identity politics. Don't take it from me. Look at what many Democrats said at the time for her basis for being put into that position, that she was a woman of color. Their words, not mine. Well, if they put her in that position based on identity politics, then I think it's going to be very difficult for them to pass her over unless they actually admit they were wrong before, which is impossible for them to do. And so I think it's either got to be Kamala Harris or somebody else who checks those same boxes, like Michelle Obama. And I think the latter possibility, people discount it. I think it's actually more likely than most people expect, because that would also be the type of figure that rises above the otherwise personal competitive forces that a lot of other ambitious people who might want to run for president in the Democratic Party would have competing against each other. I think Michelle Obama does rise above that fray while still paying homage to the temple of identity politics that resulted in Kamala Harris's elevation in the first place.
Michelle Obama has said before that she doesn't want to run, but who do you think has the better chance of beating Trump? Because both Biden and Harris, in a recent CNN poll, are losing to Trump, but the gap between Harris and Trump is smaller. So who do you think is the Democrats' best option?
Look, that's for the Democratic Party to decide. The reality is, I think President Trump is on a firm course to not only win this election, but to potentially win this election in a unifying landslide like we haven't seen in this country in a generation since Reagan in 1980 and 1984. And I do think this country is in bad need of that type of unifying result. We're used to these razor-thin margins all the way from the 2000 election on down that I do think has divided this country and created an artificial perception of division. When, in fact, when I travel this country now, a lot of people in communities that would have otherwise supposedly gone Democrat, urban inner city communities, Black Americans, young Americans, even people who are working class Americans that might have historically voted Democrat, I think they're sick and tired of the way those policies have left them holding the bag, particularly economically. And I also think that this scourge of illegal mass migration into this country has left Americans of every color and every partisan affiliation worse off for that illegal migration crisis and the wave of crime in the cities across this country. So I think President Trump has an opportunity to make this a unifying landslide victory, irrespective of who the Democrats put up. But that comes back to the cautionary note I offered earlier. We can't fall into the trap of obsessing over who the nominee is going to be on the other side. I think we have to do the harder work of looking in the mirror and asking ourselves, who are we and what do we actually stand for? Not just as Republicans, but as Americans. And I think if President Trump does that, I think he's on track to already doing it. I think he did a great job at the debate and a lot of his recent speeches. If he stays on that track, Republicans up and down the ballot, I think, are going to be able to unite this country in a landslide.